A nameless Sicilian vagrant, Giuseppe Balsamo, was born into poverty. He was a self-made man, traveling through European courts, selling fake elixirs of immortality and promises of eternal youth to the continent's most influential figures. This is how he became Count Cagliostro, the Grand Copt, a magician, a prophet, the founder of secret lodges, and the adored idol of the aristocracy, a man whose name resounded from St. Petersburg to Paris. His dizzying ascent occurred against a backdrop of widespread obsession with occultism and a desperate hunger for miracles. Discard the romantic tales of a mysterious mage or a tragic genius who defied the system. Before you stands a cold, calculating criminal whose only talent lay in his masterful ability to deceive. His life is not mysticism, but a practical guide to orchestrating history's greatest, meticulously planned, and brilliantly executed swindles. His life is not mysticism, but a practical guide to orchestrating history's greatest, meticulously planned, and brilliantly executed swindles. But before he became Count Cagliostro, the charming magician and idol of the courts, there was another man, Giuseppe Balsamo, born into the squalor of Palermo, Sicily, a city that was itself a hotbed of vice, superstition, and a desperate struggle for survival. It was here, amidst the dirty streets, under the scorching sun, that the man who would later shake all of Europe was forged. 18th century Palermo was the ideal crucible for a future genius of deception. It was a city of stark contrasts. The dazzling wealth of an aristocracy steeped in idleness and alchemy coexisted with the abject poverty of the slums, where hunger and disease were commonplace. Superstition, witchcraft, and charlatanism thrived here, becoming for many the only source of hope or a means of survival. In such an environment, deprived of parental care from an early age, his father died when Giuseppe was very young, and his mother, unable to cope, effectively abandoned him. The boy quickly learned a crucial lesson. The world is ruled not by laws, but by the ability to manipulate others' weaknesses. At the age of 12, he was sent to a Capuchin monastery, where he was supposed to receive an education and humility. Instead, the monastery became young Balsamo's first school of hypocrisy. He mastered Latin, learned to forge handwriting, eavesdropped on confessions which he then used for blackmail, and observed how monks, supposedly communicating with higher powers, exploited the ignorance of their parishioners for their own gain. One of the monks, an apothecary, introduced him to the basics of medicine and pharmacology, but Giuseppe was far more interested in the potential to create fake elixirs and poisons than in the medicinal properties of herbs. He was expelled from the monastery after only 4 months, but he had already gained invaluable experience. Faith is a tool, and human folly is an inexhaustible resource. Returning to the streets of Palermo, Balsamo began to hone his skills. He forged documents, sold common weeds disguised as rare herbs, impersonated an alchemist capable of turning lead into gold, and even organized an underground gambling den. His scams were petty but audacious. Each successful deception only solidified his belief in his own impunity and superiority over others. He felt no remorse in deceiving the gullible, seeing them merely as easy prey. Gradually, Giuseppe Balsamo ceased to be just a street hustler. A predator was emerging within him, one who realized that his true talent lay not in physical strength or craftsmanship, but in the ability to subjugate other minds. The point of no return had been crossed. He had irrevocably chosen the path of deception, a path that led him away from the dirty streets of Palermo to the glittering courts of Europe, where new, far grander victims awaited. Europe in the late 18th century seemed to be on the cusp of grand changes. Reason and the Enlightenment proclaimed a new era, yet beneath this thin veneer of rationality simmered an ancient, unquenchable thirst for miracles. Monarchies, which had ruled the continent for centuries, felt the instability of their thrones. Disgruntled philosophers, secret societies, and the growing poverty of the masses created a tense atmosphere where any rumor of secret knowledge or supernatural power found fertile ground. Meanwhile, the courts of European capitals from Versailles to St. Petersburg were awash in unprecedented luxury and idleness. The aristocracy, jaded by balls, intrigues, and romantic escapades, sought new thrills. Boredom was their main enemy, and belief in science, despite all its achievements, often yielded to blind trust in occultism, alchemy, and spiritualism. Against the backdrop of rapid advancements in natural sciences, belief in the mystical not only did not wane but flourished in new, fanciful forms. Secret lodges and brotherhoods sprang up everywhere, promising their members not only social status, but also access to ancient secrets, enlightenment, and even immortality. Masons, Rosicrucians, Illuminati, their ranks swelled with members of high society, eager for esoteric knowledge, influence, and, no less importantly, a sense of their own chosenness. People believed in the philosopher's stone, in the elixir of eternal youth, in the ability to summon spirits and predict the future. Newspapers were filled with advertisements for miraculous remedies capable of curing any illness, and for seers ready to reveal the secrets of fate for a decent sum. The economic chasm between the tiny minority of the rich and the vast majority of the poor deepened daily. While commoners struggled for survival, the elite spent untold fortunes on luxuries, exotic pursuits, and any promise that could alleviate their boredom or prolong their earthly existence. In this world, where wealth was boundless and gullibility unfathomable, anyone who could play on human fears, vanity, and the desire for miracles could gain unprecedented influence. Europe was not merely a waiting victim. It was a stage perfectly set for the appearance of a genius of manipulation, capable of transforming a universal thirst for wonder into a grand spectacle. It was into this simmering mixture of unfulfilled hopes and unrestrained passions that Giuseppe Balsamo stepped. But Balsamo did not step into it alone. His companion was Lorenza Feliciani, a young but already experienced courtesan whom he seduced and later married. She proved to be not just his accomplice, but an indispensable tool in his ascent, using her beauty and acting talent to charm future victims. Together, they began their journey across Europe, honing the art of petty swindles, from selling fake jewels to organizing fictitious spiritual seances in Rome and Naples. But Giuseppe understood. For a truly grand game, he needed not just a new legend, but an entirely new identity. It was in Malta, under the patronage of the Grand Master of the Order of St. John, Manuel Pinto de Fonseca, that Giuseppe Balsamo began his transformation. Pinto, himself intrigued by alchemy and occultism, became the ideal target. Balsamo presented himself as a student of a mysterious master, possessing ancient secrets. He performed tricks he passed off as alchemical transmutations, and offered elixirs, supposedly granting longevity. Pinto, impressed or simply naive, gave him access to his library, laboratory, and, more importantly, to his connections in high society. Here, amidst ancient manuscripts and esoteric symbols, Balsamo didn't just study, he created. He forged his new legend. He was no longer a Sicilian vagrant. He became Count Cagliostro, born, he claimed, in Egypt, raised in Arabia, initiated into the secrets of ancient mystical orders. With this new, carefully constructed identity, Cagliostro and his wife, now calling herself Serafina, began their triumphant procession through European courts. Their visits were not mere journeys, but meticulously planned performances. In each new city, Cagliostro appeared as a noble philanthropist, generously distributing gold coins to the poor, which immediately won him popular affection and the attention of the aristocracy. But his true business was different. He sold not just elixirs, but promises of health, beauty, and eternal youth. His balm of youth, a mixture of ordinary wine, herbs, and spices, cost exorbitant sums, but its effect was purely placebo. Yet Cagliostro masterfully exploited the crowd effect and made grand claims of miraculous cures, which, of course, were never independently verified. His performances included not only miraculous cures, but also the creation of gold from common metals. Before the astonished eyes of aristocrats, he conducted alchemical experiments using pre-prepared crucibles with hidden gold ingots. He predicted the future based on rumors and gossip that Serafina gathered while socializing in salons. But the pinnacle of his deception was the so-called Egyptian Masonic Lodge. Cagliostro didn't just join an existing Masonic movement. He created his own, supposedly based on ancient Egyptian mysteries, promising its members not only mystical enlightenment, but also power over the elements, immortality, and communication with angels. Entry to this lodge cost enormous sums, and the initiation ritual itself, full of mysterious symbols and pompous speeches, was a meticulously staged spectacle. Lodge members, including Europe's most influential and wealthy individuals, believed Cagliostro possessed secret knowledge that could change their lives. He amassed colossal sums by selling invisible keys to ancient wisdom and recipes for immortality. His followers, blinded by their thirst for miracles and a sense of their own chosenness, became his best advertisers, spreading rumors of his extraordinary abilities. From London to St. Petersburg, from Warsaw to Paris, the name of Count Cagliostro resounded, and his lodges multiplied, bringing him not only immense wealth, but also unprecedented influence. He was not a magician. He was a brilliant marketer, selling the most sought-after commodity of the era, hope for a miracle. But to sell this hope, Cagliostro didn't just offer remedies or rituals. He sold himself, transforming into a living embodiment of a miracle. His appearance in any city was a meticulously planned spectacle. Tall, stately, with a piercing gaze and a voice that seemed to envelop every listener, he exuded an aura of ancient wisdom and unearthly nobility. His luxurious attire, exotic jewels, and constant retinue only amplified this effect, creating the image not just of a man, but of an envoy from another world. He never rushed, allowing rumors to precede him, fueling curiosity and the desire to meet the enigmatic Count. Cagliostro was a virtuoso psychologist, masterfully playing on the most intimate human weaknesses. He saw before him not just potential victims, but a tangle of fears, vanity, and insatiable desires. The aristocracy, jaded by everyday life, craved thrilling experiences and confirmation of their exceptionality. He offered them not just elixirs of immortality, but the illusion of control over time and death. Not just alchemical experiments, but the promise of boundless wealth. His Egyptian Masonic lodge became the apotheosis of this game. Entry cost exorbitant sums, but it gave a sense of belonging to something secret, ancient, and powerful. The initiation rituals, full of mystical symbols and pompous speeches, were nothing more than meticulously staged performances designed to convince the newly initiated of their own chosenness and the boundless power of the Grand Copt. His main tool was not sorcery, but information. While Cagliostro charmed the nobility with his philosophical discussions and demonstrations of miracles, his wife Serafina worked tirelessly. In social salons, at receptions and balls, she gathered gossip, rumors, personal secrets, and financial troubles of the most influential figures. This information became gold in Cagliostro's hands. He used it to make surprisingly accurate predictions or give wise advice, demonstrating supposedly supernatural insight. People amazed by his knowledge did not realize that their own secrets had become part of his carefully orchestrated game. He knew how to turn his victims into his accomplices. Those who had already paid huge sums for his elixirs or lodge membership became his best advertising agents. They not only spread rumors of his extraordinary abilities but also, subconsciously, sought to justify their own investments, convincing themselves and others of the authenticity of his gift. This was a brilliant move. The more a person invested in Cagliostro, be it money, time, or reputation, the more psychologically tied they became to this illusion. This created a viral effect that multiplied his followers and immense wealth. His adaptability was astonishing. He shifted the emphasis of his legend depending on the audience. In St. Petersburg, he might be a healer and seer. In Paris, an alchemist and spiritual guide. He was constantly innovating, inventing new tricks and refining old ones, until his grand adventure encompassed the entire continent. Cagliostro didn't just deceive. He built an empire on the foundation of human naivety, fear, and the thirst for miracles, proving that the most profitable commodity is a skillfully sold illusion. His empire of illusions flourished, sustained not only by the naivety of the masses, but also by those who consciously or unconsciously acted as his patrons, beneficiaries, and even unwitting accomplices. European courts, jaded and bored, didn't just crave miracles, they actively bought into them. Monarchs like Frederick the Great or Catherine the Great initially observed the Cagliostro phenomenon with interest. For them, he was not only a source of entertainment, but also, perhaps, a tool to divert attention from real political problems. Aristocrats, steeped in debt and intrigue, saw in him not only a savior from ailments and old age, but also a source of influence, a way to gain secret knowledge that would elevate them above others. They didn't just pay him exorbitant sums, they granted him legitimacy, opening the doors of their palaces and introducing him to their influential friends, thereby becoming his most effective advertising agents. Cagliostro's presence at court was mutually beneficial. He gained money and status, while the elite received exotic entertainment, the illusion of control over destiny, and the opportunity to feel part of something greater than ordinary court life. Many of them were not merely deceived, but active participants in the spectacle, willing to believe in a miracle as long as it aligned with their own ambitions or desires. Some perhaps even used him for their own purposes, as a source of rumors or a tool to influence others. In this complex web of interests, where everyone played their part, Cagliostro was merely the tip of the iceberg, skillfully manipulating others' weaknesses. However, any grand scheme has not only patrons, but also implacable enemies. As Cagliostro's influence grew and his name echoed from London to St. Petersburg, he inevitably clashed with those who saw him as a threat. These were not just debunkers, like those who tried to expose him for fraud back in Palermo, but far more powerful forces. The Church, particularly the Inquisition, viewed any secret societies and miracles not sanctioned by the Vatican with suspicion. Inquisitors saw heresy in his Egyptian Masonic lodge and blasphemy in his claims of communicating with spirits. They could not tolerate competition in the market of miracles and soul salvation. Beyond religious zealots, Cagliostro also acquired secular adversaries, those who lost influence or money due to his activities or simply envied his dizzying success. However, the main antagonist whose story became closely intertwined with Cagliostro's downfall was Cardinal Louis de Rohan. This influential French aristocrat, Grand Almoner of France and Bishop of Strasbourg, became embroiled in the infamous affair of the diamond necklace, which shook all of Europe and became one of the catalysts for the French Revolution. Rohan, an extremely vain and gullible man, longed to regain the favor of Queen Marie Antoinette, who disliked him. It was this desire that the swindlers exploited, using Cagliostro's name to lend weight to their scheme. Although Cagliostro was not the orchestrator of this particular fraud, his name and reputation as a magician and seer became an integral part of the conspiracy, and his involvement, however indirect, put him at risk. The accusation of complicity in this grand scandal was not merely a blow to his reputation, but a direct confrontation with the highest authority, foreshadowing his inevitable end. And so, in 1785, this carefully constructed house of cards began to crumble. The affair of the diamond necklace, a scandal already shaking France, became Cagliostro's final mistake, the point of no return. He was not the instigator of this grand deception, but his name, his aura of mystery, and his connection to the gullible Cardinal Rohan proved to be a fatal lure. The swindlers behind the necklace affair skillfully wove him into their web of intrigue, making Rohan believe that Cagliostro, the Grand Copt, could influence Queen Marie Antoinette herself through mystical rituals. In August 1785, by order of King Louis XVI, Count Cagliostro was arrested and thrown into the ominous dungeons of the Bastille. His wife, Serafina, followed him. This was not just an arrest. It was a public humiliation, the culmination of his dizzying ascent. The world he had so masterfully deceived finally had the opportunity to examine him under a microscope. The trial for the necklace affair became a veritable circus, captivating all of Europe. Newspapers were full of details, publicly discussing every move of the magician, every one of his tricks. It was here, in the dock, amidst accusations of fraud and conspiracy, that Cagliostro paradoxically displayed one of his last talents, that of a dramatic actor. He did not plead guilty, nor did he repent, but instead delivered a fiery speech, declaring himself a victim of slander and intrigue. This speech, full of pathos and self-justification, only added fuel to the fire of public hysteria. Ultimately, Cagliostro was acquitted in the necklace affair. The court found no evidence of his direct involvement in the theft and forgery. But this victory was Pyrrhic. Cagliostro's reputation was irrevocably ruined. His name, once synonymous with miracles and secret knowledge, was now associated with scandal and deception. Paris, which had once applauded him, now demanded his expulsion. Soon after his acquittal, King Louis XVI issued a decree banishing Cagliostro from France. He was forced to leave the country, having lost most of his fortune and the trust of the elite. Cagliostro, however, would not have been himself if he had given up immediately. He attempted to revive his empire in other European capitals. In London, he tried to publish memoirs in which he exposed his enemies and justified himself. In Germany, he again tried to establish his Egyptian lodges, but the former luster was gone. Suspicion followed him closely. His former patrons turned away, and new potential victims were far more cautious. The era of naivety, which he had so skillfully exploited, was gradually fading, giving way to skepticism. Attempts to restore his lost grandeur led him to Rome in 1789. This was a fateful step. The Eternal City, the center of the Catholic world, was the last place where such a charlatan could thrive. Here he was met not by fame, but by the Inquisition, which had long had a grudge against him. The Church could not tolerate competition in matters of miracles and soul salvation. The inquisitors were not interested in fake diamonds or false elixirs. They were interested in his Egyptian Masonic lodge, his claims of communicating with spirits, his heretical rituals. In December 1789, just a few months after arriving in Rome, Giuseppe Balsamo was arrested on charges of heresy and Freemasonry. This time there was nowhere to run. His luxurious attire and exotic jewels were replaced by a prison uniform. The Inquisition's interrogations were far harsher than any secular court. He tried to resist, tried to play his role again, but in the face of religious fanaticism and the relentless logic of the interrogators, his tricks proved powerless. Unlike the Parisian court, the Roman Inquisition was not looking for evidence of theft. It was looking for heresy, and it found it. The Inquisition trial lasted for 2 long years. Finally, in 1791, Cagliostro was sentenced to death for heresy and membership in a Masonic lodge. However, Pope Pius VI commuted the death sentence to life imprisonment in the fortress of San Leo. His books and manuscripts were burned in the public square, and his Egyptian Masonic lodge was officially declared heretical and banned. Within the cold walls of San Leo fortress, stripped of all his illusions and followers, Giuseppe Balsamo spent the last 4 years of his life. He died in 1795, not as the Grand Copt, but as an ordinary prisoner, forgotten by the world he had so skillfully deceived. The infamous diamond necklace, valued at 1,600,000 livres, never graced the Queen's neck. The elusive treasure was secretly dismantled, its precious stones sold piece by piece on the black markets of London and Amsterdam, vanishing without a trace into the abyss of European commerce. For jewelers Beymer and Bassange, whose reputation and capital depended on this transaction, the affair resulted in complete ruin. They never received a single sou. Cardinal Louis de Rohan, though acquitted by the court, forever lost the crown's trust and public respect. His ambitions were buried under the wreckage of his own vanity. The main culprit, Jeanne de Lamotte, was branded and sentenced to life imprisonment, but she audaciously escaped from prison to publish scandalous memoirs that further savagely attacked Marie Antoinette's reputation. The necklace affair was not merely a court scandal. It became a public indictment of the French monarchy. Every new twist in this story, fueled by the press and biting pamphlets, poisoned the already fragile bond between the crown and the people. The public, weary of royal extravagance and aristocratic idleness, saw Marie Antoinette not as an innocent victim of intrigue, or worse, a cynical manipulator, a symbol of the decay of power. This grand deception, involving the highest-ranking officials of the state, vividly demonstrated the incompetence, moral decay, and corruption of the elite. The crown avoided direct financial losses, as the necklace was never paid for, but the reputational damage was irreparable. The skepticism and cynicism sparked by this affair spread like a plague, feeding anti-monarchical sentiments and accelerating the approach of the revolutionary explosion. Cagliostro's downfall, though not direct, was intimately linked to this scandal and became symbolic of the end of an era. His arrest and public trial stripped the grand Copt of his mask, exposing the mechanics of his grand mystifications. The world he had so masterfully deceived finally saw his true face. Not a magician, but a brilliant swindler. Society, which only yesterday eagerly bought elixirs of immortality and keys to ancient secrets, now began to ask uncomfortable questions. Gradually, but inexorably, the thirst for miracles gave way to cold calculation and critical thinking. The era that allowed Balsamo to become Cagliostro was coming to an end. His physical death in a prison cell was not the end of Count Cagliostro. On the contrary, it was precisely when the man Giuseppe Balsamo vanished that an immortal myth was born. Stripped of his freedom, consigned to oblivion, he paradoxically found a new, far more powerful life in the popular imagination. The world he had so masterfully deceived was unwilling to part with the image of a mysterious magician, capable of performing wonders. The legend of the Grand Copt, a brilliant alchemist and seer, proved far more appealing than the unvarnished truth about a cold-blooded swindler. After his death, Cagliostro's story didn't just live on, it mutated, transforming into something more than just the biography of a criminal. Literature, opera, theater, and even folk tales embraced his name, romanticizing his image. From a mere charlatan, he was transformed into a tragic hero who defied the system, or the last true magician whose secrets were unjustly buried by the Inquisition. This is the main paradox of his legacy. A man whose life was dedicated to creating illusions himself became the greatest of them. His downfall, as dramatic as his rise, only fueled the myth-making, making his figure even more compelling. The universal lesson of Cagliostro's story remains relevant to this day. It reminds us how deep humanity's need is for wonder, for secret knowledge, for something that transcends the mundane. Even in the age of enlightenment, when reason seemingly should have triumphed, belief in magic and the willingness to pay exorbitant sums for promises of eternal youth or untold riches proved stronger. Cagliostro merely exposed this vulnerability, turning it into his main capital. His story is not just a chronicle of one grand swindle, but an eternal mirror reflecting our own readiness to be deceived, our thirst for miracles, which will always feed the most skilled manipulators. He proved that to control the world, one doesn't need magic or force. It's enough to skillfully sell an illusion.